Welcome to Energetic Advantage, the podcast where energy isn't woo, it's your edge. I'm your host, Jessica Serrato, intuitive strategist, lifelong pattern decoder, lover of numbers, and energetic guide for visionary leaders. Around here, we go energy first, strategy second. Every episode will give you a perspective, a tool, or a timeline shift that helps you lead from your power. Because the truth is, your energy is your most undervalued asset until you learn how to use it. Get ready, you're about to have the advantage. Let's begin. Welcome back. Today, I want to start with a question. What if your week doesn't start when you think it does? How's that for a no intro, quick dive into today's topic? You know, most of us, or for those of us who work in a traditional sense, the week starts on a Monday. Or you might be someone who has a calendar and it goes Sunday through Saturday. But what if that isn't when your week starts? I know it sounds strange, but stay with me. Because one of the things that I've noticed over the years is how many people tell me that they feel like they're constantly fighting their schedule. And not just their schedule, but their calendar, trying to force themselves to do creative work when they feel analytical, or trying to have important conversations when they really just want space to think, trying to make big decisions when they're actually in a season of reflection. And somewhere along the way, we collectively decided that Monday is the beginning of the week. Now, don't get me wrong, Monday is a perfectly fine day, but Monday or Sunday, neither day is actually the beginning of my week. And it might not be the beginning of yours either. Because according to the system I use, astronumerology, your week, your personal week, begins on the day you were born. And once I started working with this concept, it completely changed how I look at productivity, planning, creativity, decision-making, and honestly, life. So today, I'm going to introduce you to one of my favorite frameworks, and we're going to call it Your Week. By the end of this episode, you are going to know exactly how to identify your personal weekly rhythm and how to use it. So you will stop feeling like you're swimming upstream and you're going to start moving with the current. Now, I do want to tell you that I have created a resource for you. And I've put the link in the show notes. So today's topic, today's conversation is going to have a lot of information in it. It's going to have a lot of reflection, and I want you to stay in the conversation. So for that reason, just know that I created this beautiful resource for you. It helps you determine what day of the week you were born. It takes you through your personal cycle and then what to do about it. So whether you're the type of person who wants to stop this podcast right now and go download the resource so you can listen with it, or if you're walking or listening at another time, make sure that you come and get this resource, because the resource is really what's going to help you take this information today and bring it into real world practicality, which of course is, my specialty, bridging the woo with the life. Okay, so the day you are born becomes the first day of your personal cycle. And each day of your personal cycle is associated with a planet. And that planet's energy can tell us what is best suited for that particular cycle or day. The first day, we start with Mercury. And then the cycle moves through Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune before beginning again. So for example, I was born on a Thursday. So that means that Thursday is the start of my week, and therefore Thursday is Mercury. Friday is Venus, Saturday is Mars, Sunday is Jupiter, Monday is Saturn, Tuesday is Uranus, and Wednesday is Neptune. And I laugh as I say this because one, of my kids is also born on a Thursday. And my husband and my other child are born on different days. And I can totally see how this plays out within my family unit. And of course, it also plays out in the organizations and the associations I support and my clients as well. And the reason I love this framework is because it gives people permission to work with their own rhythm instead of someone else's. Because, I would say that most productivity advice assumes everybody works the same way, but we know that is not true. If you just think about during the day, some people wake up energized, the early birds. Some people come alive at night, the night owls. Some people like to process. Some people like to move immediately. So why would we assume that everyone should approach their week in the exact same way? So now I'm going to take you through these planets, and spoiler, I'm also going to talk about some bonus planets, including Pluto and the sun and the moon later, because that applies to all of you here. So hang tight, stick with me. This is going to be fun. Now, I do want to preface this by saying I know that I view this energy differently than most. I don't look at the planets as controlling your life. I was going to say hate. I don't like that word. It drives me bonkers when someone says, well, Mercury is in retrograde, so it's not a great time to do this. No, energy does not control us. I look at the planets as archetypes, as patterns, as energies, as human experiences, right? The ancients used these planetary energies to understand cycles of life. And in our life today, these archetypes will still show up everywhere, right? It's not because Mercury is making you send an email. No, it's because communication is a universal human experience. Connection is a universal human experience. Action is a universal human experience, right? Discipline is a universal human experience. I've just described some of the planet's characteristics, and I've brought them back to these universal human experiences. The planets are just simply giving us a language for understanding different modes of energy, okay? And so as I walk through these planets, I really want you to think about your own life and how this applies and what feels most natural for you. And I'm going to warn you ahead of time that what you hear in today's podcast, you will not hear anywhere else. Because the way I teach and share about planetary energy is very different. And here's why. When I first started really coming into this work and learning this information, I was incredibly annoyed. And I mean that in the best possible way. Because I would read something like, or a teacher would say something like, Mercury rules communication. And my immediate response is like, okay, but why? Why communication? Who decided that? What about Mercury makes it about communication? What does communication actually feel like energetically? And honestly, no one gave me information or answer that satisfied me. So I do what I always do. I went looking for my own. I started meditating and connecting with each planet. I created guided visualizations, connecting with the energy of each one. And I also went back to high school science class, or, a more evolved version of it. And I became fascinated with the actual planets themselves, the science, the astronomy, the physical characteristics. And what I discovered was that the physical properties of the planets mirror their energetic properties in really beautiful ways. And suddenly, the planets stopped feeling like concepts and they started to feel alive. They started feeling like teachers. And that's ultimately where a lot of my understanding and connection comes from. Not just the books, but experience, curiosity, observation, connection. And the more I learned about the actual planets, the more the energetic meaning made sense. So just like I teach the energy of the numbers in numerology, I'm not asking you to memorize anything here. I'm really trying to engage your senses and have you connect with these planets in a way that you've never done before. So let's start with Mercury. And if you can do this in your head, figure out what day of the week is your Mercury. If you have the resource, you can figure that out as well. And if you're not quite there yet, you can just listen to the energy of Mercury. So Mercury is this energy of communication, ideas, thinking, learning, strategy. If Mercury were a question, it would ask, what needs to be understood? And this is one of my favorite days because Mercury is where we gather information. It's where we brainstorm. It's where we map ideas, where we make connections between ideas. It's a fantastic day for writing, for teaching, for podcast planning, for content creation, for sales conversations, for researching, for strategy. If you're writing a book, for example, Mercury is a beautiful day to outline the chapters, map concepts, create structures, brain dump ideas. I want you to think of Mercury as your mental workspace day. It's the whiteboard day. It's the strategy day. It's the let me connect all the dots kind of day. And one of the things that fascinates me, of course, about Mercury is that it's the closest planet to the sun, the closest to consciousness, the closest to awareness. And Mercury moves fast, like really fast. Its entire orbit around the sun takes 88 Earth days. And so that's Mercury energy. Fast thoughts, fast ideas, connection, communication, curiosity. But Mercury also experiences these extreme temperature swings, going from burning hot to freezing cold. And that's a little bit how our mind works too. 1 minute we're totally inspired, and the next minute we're convinced that nothing will work. So Mercury reminds us that our thoughts move and we must change our mind. They are not permanent. So now that you know the energy of Mercury, I want you to think about what you do or what is on your to-do list throughout your week and what actions or activities would feel really supported by a Mercury day. And also, what activities would really feel draining on a Mercury day? So for me, for example, I always used to teach my numerology courses on a Mercury day, on a Thursday. That felt really great for me. I also create space in my schedule on Thursday to brain dump. And then I have a meeting with my team on Friday, which is a Venus day, to share these ideas, right? Because if I'm consuming on a Thursday, my Mercury day, if I'm jam-packed with meetings where my mind is filled with other people's thoughts and information, it's going to feel very draining for me. And so how can you kind of think about your own life and what you do in your work and in your life? And how can you maybe more align these actions and activities with the energy of your Mercury day? Okay, so let's move into Venus. And Venus has completely different energy. It's all about relationships and beauty, receiving. If Mercury asks what needs to be understood, Venus asks, okay, what wants to be nurtured? This is a great day for client appreciation, networking, date nights, photography, branding, design, community building, right? And, relationships are productive. Connection, beauty is productive. We live in a world that often celebrates the result or the output of something. But Venus reminds us that relationships are often the very thing that creates the opportunities that we're trying so hard to manufacture. And I don't want to jump ahead here, but if we think about Mercury as the idea, And we're going to get to Mars, which is about the implementation of the idea. Do you see how Venus is such a beautiful bridge between these two energies? Is the conversation or the relationship, right? How many of us move forgetting about Venus and then wondering why the idea stalls out, right? So Venus days aren't about crossing things off a list. Maybe it's about deepening a relationship. Maybe it's about creating something beautiful, enjoying your life, right? And Venus, the planet, really completely changed the way I understood relationships. Because as a planet, Venus rotates on its axis so slowly that one day on Venus is actually longer than a year. I'm going to say that again. A day is longer than a year. And energetically, this feels like Venus. It's like what everyone used to tell me when my kids were super little. The days feel long, but the years feel short. And isn't that the truth when it comes to relationships? So slowing down, savoring it, feeling it, experience it. Venus is not about rushing, it's receiving. And Venus is one of the brightest objects in the sky. Of course it is, because beauty is meant to be seen. So if I think about my Venus day, I mentioned I have that meeting with my team, right? That connection. And then I have nothing else scheduled. I meet with them first thing in the morning, and then I have the day to connect with myself. It's a day that I typically schedule body work, maybe a haircut, right? And I love looking forward to this day because of that. Okay, so then comes Mars. And Mars is the planet of action, of movement, of courage, of momentum. Mars asks what needs to move. So it's not a day for thinking. It is the day for action, for launching, for selling, for making decisions, for taking the risk, for doing the thing, right? Mars does not need more information. Mars needs movement. And I think a lot of people get stuck because they're trying to solve a Mars problem with Mercury energy. They're thinking about something that needs action, or they're strategizing about something that needs movement. Mars says, enough planning, let's go, right? And when we think about this energy of Mars, Mars is so fascinating to me because it contains the highest volcano, the largest volcano in the solar system, so height-wise, and also the largest canyon. So think about that. The highest highs and the deepest depths, the greatest extremes. And that feels like Mars. Action, courage, intensity, momentum. And really, when I felt into that and connected with the energy of Mars, I really stopped feeling Mars as any type of aggression, right? And I started seeing it as capacity because Mars has range. Then we arrive at Jupiter. And Jupiter is one of my favorite energies because it's that of expansion, of possibility, of vision, of growth, of opportunity. It is the largest planet, right? And it asks, what becomes possible if I stop making decisions from my current reality? So Jupiter is where you get to zoom out. It's where you think bigger. It's where you learn and explore and ask these bigger questions. Now, again, jumping ahead, Saturn is going to ask you what's realistic. But while you're in Jupiter, it's going to ask you what is possible. And both matter, obviously, because if you never visit Jupiter, your world can become very small because Jupiter is where possibilities live. It's where your future self starts leaving clues. And this one is so amazing. Jupiter is so massive that its gravitational pull actually protects Earth. It literally pulls in objects or deflects things that might otherwise hit our planet. And this, like abundance, makes sense. Jupiter is the planet of abundance because Jupiter isn't just expansion, it's support, it's protection, it's evidence, It's the feeling that something bigger is working with you, right? I also love that Jupiter has at least 79 moons and a giant storm larger than Earth that has been raging on the planet for centuries. Jupiter doesn't think small ever. And the interesting thing, between Mars and Jupiter, there is a very large asteroid belt. And this is where I think people feel the hiccup between doing the thing and seeing the result of said thing, right? It's not always easy, but it is there. Then comes Saturn. Oh, poor Saturn. No one ever wants Saturn. Everyone wants Jupiter. Nobody wants Saturn. But here's the thing. Without Saturn, nothing gets built because Saturn is structure, responsibility, mastery, commitment, boundaries, systems. Saturn asks, what needs a foundation? This is where you organize, where you create systems, where you review your finances, where you handle contracts, where you clean up loose ends. This is where you build the infrastructure that allows that expansion that you felt in Jupiter to happen. Because dreams are amazing, but dreams without structure remain dreams. Saturn is what turns these visions into reality. Saturn is what makes dreams real. Without Saturn, everything just stays an idea. And this energy of Saturn really completely changed for me when I learned more about the rings. Because most people, I think, assume that Saturn's rings are like a solid structure, but they're not. There's these little particles, these individual pieces moving together. And that feels exactly like the structure that Saturn is meant to help us with. It's not just one thing. It's a collection of systems working together, layer by layer, piece by piece, right? That create these rings. And that is architecture. And because of this, Saturn sometimes feels like speed bumps because we've just gone through this big expansion and have all of these dreams in Jupiter. And Saturn's like, but are you sure? Like, are you really sure? Well, what about this? And what about this? But do you see how that's really meant to help us? Because Saturn wants our dreams to come to reality. So it's showing us the systems and structures that we can really lean into to make that happen. And the other thing that I love about Saturn is it doesn't mess around. It's really direct. And sometimes people feel this directness as harshness. But for me, I always go to the Brene Brown quote, like clear is kind. And Saturn is very clear. I don't think anyone has ever said that Saturn is the kindest planet, but it for sure is the clearest. So maybe it is. Maybe it is the kindness. So then we move to Uranus. And Uranus is one of the most misunderstood energies because it is so different. So Uranus is about innovation, freedom, disruption, breakthrough, reinvention. Uranus asks, like, what if there's another way? And this is where we challenge assumptions. This is where we question the rules. This is where new ideas emerge. This is where anomalies are born. You know, in a future episode, I'm going to talk about these energetic anomalies and how we can really lean into them for innovation. You know, every breakthrough started as a ridiculous idea. Every innovation started as something people thought would never work. Airbnb, Netflix, Uber. Someone had to be willing to question the existing model. That's Uranus. Uranus is the energy of possibility through disruption. The rebel, right? And it's so interesting. Every other planet is doing one thing. So you can't see my fingers, I know. But every planet, if it's rotating on its axis, like just in a regular up and down fashion, Uranus literally rotates on its side. Uranus is over here doing its own thing. And the planet itself is unconventional. It physically behaves differently. And so that is the embodiment of the energy, which is, what if we tried it another way? The last planet here in this rotation is Neptune. And Neptune is intuition, imagination, reflection, spirituality, meaning. Neptune asks, like, what is trying to emerge? And this is a day to slow down, to journal, to meditate, to walk, to reflect, to listen, to dream. Neptune is really less about doing and more about receiving. It's where inspiration often arrives, but it needs the space to come because it comes not when we're chasing it, but when we've become quiet enough to hear it. And in a world obsessed with speed, Neptune is the medicine that many of us need the most. Neptune for me is fascinating because it's the windiest planet in our solar system. Winds reaching up to 2,000 kilometers an hour. But from a distance, it looks calm, beautiful, dreamy, blue. Kind of like just the ocean, right? The ocean, when you zoom out, looks so beautiful. But when you're in a wave, it can sometimes feel like it's thrashing you around. And that's exactly how intuition works. So much movement beneath the surface, so much happening that we can't quite explain it. Neptune has taught me that just because something is invisible doesn't mean that it isn't powerful. Now, here's where we bring it to real life. And one of the most important things that I really want us to understand here, the goal in me sharing with you this information is not to do certain things on certain days. This isn't about more rules. It is about awareness. You can absolutely write on a Saturn day. You can absolutely launch something on a Neptune day. You can absolutely have a hard conversation on a Jupiter day, right? The point is not restriction, it's understanding. Because once you understand the energy, you can work with it. You can anticipate it. You can plan around it. You can stop judging yourself for not feeling the same every day because we're not supposed to. And before we start rearranging our calendars here, our planetary days don't always line up with our real life. The best example I can give, and I'll give a few here, but for example, my Mars day, remember Mars is all about work and action and moving forward and getting things done, right? Purpose. My Mars day falls on a Saturday. Now, if you're a parent with kids, you will understand this problem immediately because nobody informed the school district that Saturday is my Mars day. And so there's no school. And on the flip side, no one also told the softball, taekwondo, fencing, piano, guitar, soccer teachers that Saturday is also a really great day for me to get things done for myself. Right? Like nobody checked my planetary cycle before scheduling softball tournaments. Okay? No one called and asked if I would prefer to spend my action-oriented, high-energy day full of work and purpose literally driving around. And honestly, that was annoying to hear at first, but that's not actually how it works. The energy is still available. I just had to try to find a different expression for it, right? If we think of Mars as movement and momentum, action and courage, instead of trying to schedule this 8-hour CEO workday on a Saturday, which of course would wreak havoc in my family, I ask, how can I honor Mars in the life that I'm actually living right now? And maybe this looks like I record a podcast episode before everyone wakes up. Maybe I go for a workout. I move my body. Maybe I focus just for 10 minutes, moving something forward that matters. Maybe I create that space for myself first. And instead of trying to tackle the whole to-do list, I get a few things checked off my list so that the rest of the day, I'm not moving against that energy, right? We don't have to completely reorganize our lives around the energy. We just need to acknowledge it. Okay, think about Venus. Maybe your Venus day, like you're meant to do something else. It doesn't mean Venus disappears, but maybe you schedule a lunch with a friend. Maybe you send a quick text to connect with someone. Maybe it means you wear the outfit that you love. Maybe it means taking 10 minutes to make your workspace beautiful. The energy can be honored in small ways. You know, Jupiter. It's not like on my Jupiter day, I'm on a 3-day retreat in the mountains, right? Jupiter can simply be spending 15 minutes dreaming about your future. Saturn doesn't have to be difficult, although I laugh. Saturday is my Monday and I despise Mondays. So instead, like a lot of people come to work on a Monday with like, oh, I got to tackle this. I got to complete this. I start Mondays with Pilates. And I actually don't take any clients on Mondays because I feel that my energy is really direct on Mondays. I feel like it is not conducive for how I want to show up with clients. And so I schedule my clients on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And it's Neptune. Doesn't require disappearing into a meditation cave for hours. But maybe it is a 20-minute walk without your phone, right? What I found when I do this for people is that the people who benefit most from this framework aren't those who completely redesign their schedules. They start to ask, okay, so how can I work with today's energy instead of against it? Even in a small way, because a tiny adjustment repeated every week becomes completely different result. And once you do this for yourself, again, just like I shared, you can do this for your family members. I did this a lot in my corporate life where I had a standing meeting with somebody on a particular day of the week. And after every meeting, I felt so annoyed because he would ask all of these questions of like, well, what about this? Well, could we do this differently? Blah, 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 blah. And then I looked at his chart and I was like, oh, that's his Uranus energy. Of course, he always wants to poke holes in, do things differently, feel it. And that's great for certain topics. But for other subjects, I was like, I don't want to meet with him on a Uranus day. So I switched the day of our standing meeting. And I, with 100% honesty, the switch of the day changed everything. So it is important to find out your cycle, but also to know the cycles of other people in your life. And, another way you can work with this, if you have these ongoing projects, it's not like you stop work on the project on particular days, but you can break it down into different activities. So, a great example is, say, writing a book. So let's say you're writing a book. And writing a book is actually many different activities. So if I were to break it down for you in a week, I would say, okay, Mercury would be a great day to outline. Venus would be like a storytelling day. Maybe asking someone to read it, having a conversation about it. Mars might be your word count day, right? Figuring it out, like just getting it down. Jupiter might be like, okay, what's my big message day? Saturn would be a great day for editing. Uranus would be, generating new content. And Neptune might be your inspiration day. So writing isn't one thing, it's a rhythm. And when you understand the rhythm, the process of writing becomes much more enjoyable. Okay, so I'm going to pause here for a moment and give you some action items that I'm going to come back to at the end of the episode. But really, my goal in sharing this first part of the episode, which is find out the day of the week you were born. And in my resource that I have in the show notes, it will tell you exactly how to do that. That's your Mercury day. Then assign the planets from there. And for the next week, just observe. Don't try to force anything, change anything, just notice. When do ideas come easiest? When do conversations flow naturally? When do I want to take action? When do I crave structure? When do I feel inspired? When do I need reflection? Because I want you to test this. And I want you to discover your own rhythm. The goal is not to become more productive. The goal is to become more aligned. Okay? And again, I take you through step by step in the resource of how to do this. I want to bring in another layer here, which is so fascinating to me. Okay? Your zodiac sign, your date of birth, is traditionally associated with a ruling planet. If I say this in a different way, I'm going to say there is a particular planetary energy that is part of your default operating system. Okay? For example, Aries is ruled by Mars. Gemini is ruled by Mercury. Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter. Okay? You can think of this like your native language. And yes, you can learn other languages and you can become fluent in them. But one language tends to feel the most natural. And why this matters is we're just coming out of Gemini season. So let's say you're a Gemini and Mercury is your ruler. Communication, ideas, information, connection, learning. You may notice that Mercury days feel especially productive for you, right? You may naturally gravitate towards that energy. And also, when Mercury energy feels scrambled, you feel it. You know, when Mercury goes into the microwave, right? For a Mercury ruled person, this can feel amplified because it's happening in a frequency that you use every day. Again, taking Aries and Mars. And Aries feels Mars days very strongly, right? And often feels better after making a decision, after moving. So if you're an Aries and you're getting stuck in Mercury or having too many days involve mercurial logistics or things on your to-do list, you are going to feel uncomfortable because you're disconnecting from your native frequency. So I guess the step here is, if you don't already know, you can find your sign. This is also in the resource. And you can find which planet rules your sign. And some of you out there, I hear you Cancers, I hear you Scorpios, I hear you Leos. You're saying, but Jess, wait. I'm ruled by the moon. I'm ruled by the sun. I'm ruled by Pluto and Mars. I got you. We're going to have some bonus energy here. But if you're not one of those three signs, I don't want you to stop this podcast. I don't want you to stop this episode because I'm going to share information that is also going to help you as well, right? Because the moon is such a powerful energy for all of us, right? We know this, full moon, new moon. And so feel into how these bonus energies really feed for you as well. So the moon, if we think about the energy of the moon, it reflects, it responds, it changes, right? It governs tides. It has its own cycles and rhythms, emotions, belonging. People with very strong moon energy notice shifts before they can explain them. You're frequently tracking emotional weather, not because you yourself are emotional, but because you are sensitive to changing conditions. The moon is not interested at all in productivity. It is interested in alignment. And a reminder that the moon does not produce its own light. It reflects light. So the moon isn't asking, what am I creating? The moon is asking, what am I reflecting? What is already there? What's beneath the surface? The cool thing about the moon is that it also exists in complete silence. No atmosphere, no sound. And that feels like intuition also. Usually doesn't yell, it whispers. Now we get to you Leos and the sun. And Leo is ruled by the sun, okay, not technically a planet, but it is the source, the life force, the thing that everything else orbits around. And the sun energy asks, who are you when you're fully expressed? What are you here to radiate? What are you here to illuminate? And Leo's growth often comes from being seen. Not necessarily fame, but from visibility, authenticity, creative expression. The sun doesn't chase attention. The sun shines. And a lot of the other energy we've talked about is asking, what are you doing? And the sun asks, who are you while you're doing it? And if you think about all of you here, regardless of if you are ruled by the sun or the moon, the sun and the moon energy exist every day of the week for you. So it is important to feel into these two energies every day. You know, if we talk about the sun generating its own light and the moon reflecting light, the sun creates it and it's not looking outside of itself for validation. It shines because shining is in its nature. The light's already there. And I think a lot of times for you Leos, you're misunderstood because people think Leo is about attention, and I don't really think it is. I think Leo is about expression. Attention says, look at me. And expression says, this is who I am. One is external, one is internal. And the sun doesn't care. And then you got Scorpios. Love them. I mean, hello, I'm a Scorpio. And a little bit complicated because Scorpio is ruled by Mars, yes, but it's also ruled by Pluto, my favorite troublemaker. Pluto isn't interested in just improvement. Pluto is interested in transformation, like complete overhaul transformation, like the death, the rebirth, the evolution, the truth, the power. And Scorpios often get reduced to intensity, but I think Pluto energy is really just about seeing what others don't want to see, the thing beneath the thing. So Pluto does not ask, how can I make this better? Pluto asks, what needs to die so something new can emerge? And that's a totally different frequency. It's a dwarf planet, but it has enormous influence. And I think that's the biggest Pluto lesson, is that power has nothing to do with size. Some of the biggest transformations begin with the smallest decision, the smallest truth, the smallest moment of honesty. Transformation doesn't happen because something is big. Transformation happens because something is true. And so the goal isn't to stay in your comfort zone. The goal isn't to stay in your ruling planet. The goal is, like I said, to become fluent in all of them because life requires all of them. We need Mercury to think, Venus to connect, Mars to act, Jupiter to dream, Saturn to build, Uranus to innovate, Neptune to trust, Sun to shine, Moon to reflect, Pluto to transform, right? Your ruling planet might be your home, but your growth comes from learning how to travel. And that's why I love this weekly framework. It's not about becoming more of who you've always been. It's about developing your capacity to work with every frequency that is available to you. What energy is being called forward today? So, I get that this was a different episode for me, a lot of information coming your way, but here are a few of the questions I'd love for you to reflect on. Number one, what day were you born? And if that day became the start of your week, what might change for you? If you feel into all the energy we talked about today, what planetary energy feels most natural to you? Which one do you most resist? And here's the final question, which is, what might become possible if you stopped planning your life according to someone else's rhythm and started planning it according to your own? Listen, the energy doesn't care what day the calendar says it is. The energy is still there. We just need to learn how to use it differently. And if that is not an energetic advantage, I do not know what is. So grab the resource in the show notes, work with it, share with me, message, share with your friends, share with your family. Experience this, test this out. Notice the different energy when the moon is full versus when the moon is new. Again, your seasons. Right now, we are in a season where the sun, in the northern hemisphere at least, is shining longer. What happens when that shifts and the sun has less hours in the day to shine and the moon is active for longer? So many energies to consider. Some invitations here to really work with this. And like I said, keep me posted. And if this interests you, message me if you want to go deeper, because I have some resources that I can share with you that will help you do just that. All right. We went deep today. Maybe that's my Scorpio. Maybe it's a Pluto day. You know what it is? I actually am recording this on a Friday, which is different for me, but I felt like I wanted to connect and have a conversation to not only bridge you with the planets, but to bring me closer to the planets as well. And I think I've done that. All right, everyone. See you next time. Thanks for being here inside the Energetic Advantage. If today's episode opened something for you, share it, tag it, or send it to the person who popped into your mind. And remember, energy first, strategy second. Your advantage has always been in you. Now it's time to lead with it. See you next time.